Welcome back to Unmuted, a midlife roundtable where we sit down and we talk about all of the things that maybe your grandma and your mom didn't talk to you about. Maybe it's the things that your sisters and your girlfriends are not having a conversation about. I'm Serena Haynes, a certified sexologist and sex and intimacy coach. I'll be your host for today. With us, we have Amanda Otterman, our menopause specialist. We have Lisa here, who's also a menopause consultant. Deb is the owner and absolute rock star of the Pleasure Pods, which is also our sponsor. And our guest today is absolutely astounding. I met Jenn a couple of weeks ago, and just to say that, it felt like meeting somebody from my hometown. It really was, because we are kind of similar where we are from. Jenn Salib Huber, correct, is a registered dietitian, naturopathic doctor, intuitive eating counselor, and host of the Midlife Feast podcast. She also has a book. Welcome, Jenn, to Unmuted. We're so excited to have you here all the way from the Netherlands.
Yeah, thank you so much. It really was great to meet you in person, and it definitely felt like we had been friends for a long time. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what's going on? I don't want to give it all away. So let us know who you are. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, as someone with ADHD, that's always hard for me to condense my answer, but I'm going to give it a try. So, I've been a dietitian for 25 years. I've been a naturopathic doctor for 20. And I'm now entering my fourth year postmenopause. And I feel like those are the most relevant parts of my story because I guess 11 years ago now, I found myself in perimenopause at 37. I had 3 kids under the age of 7, and it was missed for a long time by a lot of people, including me, because I was busy, a family, I owned a business. And so my fatigue, my anxiety, all of my symptoms weren't obviously perimenopausal until I started having crime scene periods and hot flashes. And then it became very obvious what was happening. But at that point, I was, just on the edge of 38. I have a really distinct memory of being on vacation, had not packed any pads or tampons with me, and got my second period in a 16-day span and had to buy a very expensive box of tampons at a gift shop because we were on a cruise. And that was really when things clicked that, oh my gosh, this is really it. This is happening. And of course, it spurred me to want to learn more. I was in practice and obviously knew about perimenopause, but didn't really know about perimenopause. And when I tried hormone therapy, and I love it for other people, but it was not for me, I had to find another option, which is when I started diving into the art and the science of menopause nutrition and how it might help me manage some of my symptoms and also how it can help me thrive postmenopause, which is how my book, Eat to Thrive During Menopause, came about. Really kind of the center of my work is just helping women manage menopause without diets and food rules, which is another kind of side quest, but all related.
Yeah. So, I can relate a little bit to that story. Just the fact that sometimes we know it doesn't happen overnight, but it sometimes feels like that because of the stage that we're in with our lives. A lot of us didn't have our babies if we're having babies at 18, 19, 20, when, menopause would hit and the kids were a little bit bigger. We're in the thick of it, going through all of the things, and it can just be so chaotic. So many of our listeners feel like their bodies have changed overnight as well. What exactly is happening beneath the surface that women are not really being told?
I think that's a great question. And I always say that if we had 50% of the population who, once they became pregnant, were surprised by the fact that they were pregnant, we would call that a public health failure. And yet we have lots of data that tells us that 50+% of women who are in perimenopause are shocked to find out that they're in perimenopause. So I think the answer to the question is that we need to be starting this conversation in high school, like in junior high, when we're talking about reproductive ages and stages. We need to talk about this menopause transition as exactly that. It's a transition. That when you reach the end of your reproductive life, you go through this transition. And then you're in this next stage. Whereas I think up until now, so much of the conversation has focused on puberty is the beginning and menopause is the end. And anything after that is an afterthought. So I think that's kind of one of the big things, is that we need to be having these conversations about perimenopause much earlier so that women know what to expect. And that's a big part of why I wanted to write this book, was almost like a what to expect when you're not expecting perimenopause. so that there can be a little bit of like a reference. I wanted to use that title, but apparently I can't. So, so to kind of answer that question is I think we need to have more conversations, and we need to also be educating, I think, our healthcare providers, because a lot of healthcare providers are still giving, just today, I had a conversation with someone who said, my doctor told me at 45, I'm too young for perimenopause, despite the fact that she has several of the symptoms that we know are clearly perimenopausal. Or women who are told that they have to miss a period or they have to be having hot flashes. Like there's still a lot of misinformation, even in the healthcare provider space.
Yeah, well, does was want to add to what you were saying about needing to teach people that are younger. Currently, I'm running a 6-week in-person menopause education for one of our local community health clinics. And this session was interesting because I had some women who brought their daughters, and the daughters are like late teens, 20s, and they're not even, they're not, of course, they don't know anything about menopause or perimenopause, but as I'm, talking to them about it and educating, they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna happen to me in like 15 years." You know, I'm so glad I'm learning about this now, right? So it's actually, as I've been doing this work for the last year and a half, 2 years in the community, I'm starting to see a shift where women are bringing their daughters and they're bringing their husbands. And like, I even see it within my own like Instagram posts and stuff where younger women are commenting, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was a thing, or that kind of thing. So,
Lisa, you might see people wanting to learn a little bit more, especially in relationships with their couples.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to just build on what Amanda was saying, though. So I was an educator for 20 years. So I know in depthly what the Ontario curriculum teaches for sure around health and development. And it's has zero around perimenopause and menopause. We do like an okay job teaching about puberty. It's okay enough that at least kiddos that age know and understand what's going to happen to their bodies. And in secondary, the line is when we're talking about menstruation and reproduction, and one day you will hit menopause and your period will stop. And that is essentially the end. And so there's lots of places where we talk about advocacy, and that is not one of the spaces that is getting enough advocacy. So thank you, Jen, for bringing that up, because I think it is a space where we really need to start getting in those doors and talking about that level of policy so that we can really start educating younger humans.
Jen, you've said that midlife is our time to thrive, not just survive. So, what inspired that philosophy? And tell us a little bit more about your book. We really want to talk about the book.
Thanks. I feel like all I've done is talk about the book, so I appreciate the invitation to talk about the book some more. And I just wanted to add on to something Amanda said about, these younger women coming into these community sessions and realizing that, oh, this could be happening to me in 15 years or whatever it is. And I was really shocked when I discovered that 1 in 5 people by the age of 40 will meet the criteria for perimenopause. And that's a really big part of what I want to get out there, because so much of the stereotypes about menopause are I envisioned Mrs. Roper from Three's Company when I thought about menopause in my 20s, or the Golden Girls. And so we really need to be changing the stereotypes and the perceptions, because menopause is a reproductive stage. It's not an age. You can go into perimenopause in your 20s if you're experiencing, very early menopause. I wanted to kind of make sure that we called that out too, so that people who might be listening in their 30s realize that there's a 1 in 5 statistical chance that they will have symptoms of perimenopause at 40. That doesn't mean you're going into menopause at 40, but it just means that you're starting to have those changes. So why I wanted to write the book. This ties a little bit more into, I think, my relationship with food and how I needed to work on that. So I, like many other women our age, I grew up in the disordered eating of the 80s and 90s. By the time that I was ready to head off to university, I wanted to study nutrition so that I could fix myself. And then I went into naturopathic medicine because that felt like that would fix me and that I would learn how to eat perfectly. Really believed in this idea of perfect eating. Along with my hot flashes and crime scene periods, I also crash landed into this other period of disordered eating, which we now know perimenopause is another window of vulnerability for that. And so my late 30s was not a good time. And what I realized when I emerged from all of that is that all of the diet and nutrition advice for menopause was about your bones, which, yes, is important, your heart, which, yes, that's important, and your weight. There really wasn't anything about how do I eat if I know this is going somewhere good? How do I eat if I want to be traveling when I'm 75 and 80? How do I eat with a focus on my health and how I feel and not just how I look and what the scale is saying? And so that's really at the heart of what my book is about. It is a heavily evidence-based menopause nutrition book. I think there's 160 some references. Everything is backed up with evidence, but it's also written with the wisdom of intuitive eating. How do I learn to listen and trust my body again while I'm going through this transition, taking advantage of that opportunity of it being a transition and really learning to eat in a way that is less reliant on maybe some of those outside metrics of what healthy is. And, as far as I know, I think it's one of the only books that really takes that really foundational, weight inclusive, intuitive eating approach.
So I think, like, to add to that, Jen, like, I also not am just a nurse, but I'm also a personal trainer and like do and have the nutritionist of the personal trainer attached to my certification. I get a lot of the women I work with are mostly over 40, and I get a lot of disordered eating things that comes in, right? I mean, they're coming to see a personal trainer because they want to lose weight. And immediately I'm saying to them, okay, well, that's not going to be our focus, right? If you want this to be your focus, I'm not your trainer. Weight loss will be a side effect of what we're going to focus on. Because we're going to focus on building strength. We're going to focus on improving your mobility. We're going to improve your flexibility. We're going to make sure that you are going to be active and fit so that as you are aging, you're going to maintain your independence. These are the things that we're going to focus on. If you lose weight in that period of time, amazing. But I'm not going to be like measuring you all the time. We are not going to be on the scale all the time. And I think a lot of women, when I go through that intake phase with them as I'm onboarding them for training, they kind of go, okay. They kind of have that sigh of relief that is not going to be this stringent type of programming where I'm going to expect them to track all their macros and, they have to eat a certain way and they have to cut carbs and like it's really amazing to see how the diet culture of this age group really creeps its ugly head again and how desperate women are at this time in their lives because they are noticing their bodies are changing and how desperate they are to do almost anything to get rid of that weight and make their bodies look like they were 20 again.
Which we can never do. So we need to kind of just settle into that and find a new way.
I just wanted to go back to what Amanda and Jen were saying about disordered eating. My husband and I have just started watching Beverly Hills 90210 from the beginning because in this time, why not? we, we need some sort of comfort. And in the very first episode, there's this scene where Brenda says to her mom, she's sitting there, she's eating a piece of kiwi, and she says, "How many calories are in one slice of kiwi?" And her mom immediately knows 12 calories per slice. And when I saw that scene, it hit me of how deeply rooted. So that scene would have been in 1990 when I was 13. So all of that has been like in our cells from so many sources that we don't even know until now. With this information, we go back and we realize just how much we've been swimming in these seas of disordered eating. And I wonder a lot that many of the ways that we tell women to eat or intermittent fasting or this or that are actually representations in a different way of disordered eating. And so, Jen, I was wondering how you see that and how you're helping women work through that disordered eating and get into their bodies and into that intuitive eating.
Lisa, you've just opened my Pandora's box, so I will try hard not to talk too much, but you are 1000% right. And so many of us grew up with that subconscious exposure to normalize what we would now consider disordered. I grew up, like so many people, with books in the kitchen from our mothers that were calorie counts. I can still vividly remember it was a little purple book and it had a little yellow title and it was calorie counts of common foods. It was about this thick. And knowing calorie counts used to be my party trick, honestly. I could absolutely tell you what was in something then. And so we grew up with this default expectation that if we were doing it right, our bodies wouldn't change. And if our bodies looked a certain way, then that was the measure of success. But to Amanda's point about behaviors and why we want to think about strength training and why we want to think about movement and even changing our diet, we know that weight is an outcome. It's not a behavior. And genetics, environment, illness, medications, there's a whole slew of factors that we have no control over. Understanding that weight is not a behavior, that you can focus on your health, including making changes to how you're eating and how you're moving, without letting the scale dictate whether or not you're successful or not, is part of what I call undieting. And so undieting is that deprogramming of some of those default beliefs. It gets more complicated, I think, in 2025 because even our medical and health cultures have now normalized a lot of things that even 20 years ago would have been clearly disordered. If we had people saying, I'm only eating 6 hours a day and I have cut out entire food groups and I fast, however, one day a week. Somebody told me the other day that their doctor condoned them fasting for a day a week as an ongoing thing. I think that really complicates things. And so as a healthcare provider, I'm often in this position of being asked, well, what do you think about? And every response really deserves an individual response because I think there aren't any one size fits all answers, with the exception that if it is considered a symptom of another condition, we really need to be careful in the language that we're using when we say it's okay. It's okay if you only eat 6 hours a day, even though you're hungry and tired and cranky and feel like it doesn't fit your life. Because we're telling people, women and men, it's not just women, that it's okay as long as it results in weight loss. And that is the part where I feel like we really need to be careful and cautious about what we say is normal, so that if somebody tries it and it works for them and it doesn't impact their life, far be it from me to tell someone that what they're doing is wrong. But in that same breath, I really want the people who are listening, who are trying all these things and feeling like they're feeling worse and it's not working and they feel like they're broken, to know that they are not broken.
I love that. I love that you just said that. In my world, in the sexuality world, we say the same thing. If you're doing something and you love it and it's not causing you any distress and, you can live your life and it makes you feel nourished and fulfilled, who am I or who is anybody to yuck your yum, to tell you that you can't? Unless the challenges come, then if it's impacting your life. So the same thing would be, there are lots of people in my world, I'm in the fitness world as well, who will try the fasting and do the things. And some people have found ways to help their bodies feel the best they can be. But then you sit down with some people, like you said, who are miserable, who are trying so hard to fit the mold of what this quote BMI told you had to be, or the scripts, like we were saying, just of perfection, quote, perfection in women, and following that intuitive eating. Women have been pushed away from their intuition since the beginning of time. If we followed our intuition, how powerful would we be? So I love that this is just one more way for women to hear, specifically women to hear, your intuition is not wrong. You need to listen to your body and what it's telling you. Amanda, you might see that a lot. I think you had something you'd like to add.
I see that lots and lots. Everything from one-to-one clients that I work with to the workshops that I do, all of this diet culture stuff just comes up all the time. And I mean, first of all, I have PTSD from all the cabbage soup that used to be like cooked in my mom's house. Just, I grew up with that diet culture, but at this, like, I have actually fired clients for eating less than 1,000 calories. I won't work or do strength training with clients who continue to engage in like behaviors that are disordered. They'll come in to do, their workout, and they tout they're so gassed and they don't have the energy, and I'm like, how'd you eat today? You're like, what did you have? Well, I'm intermittent fasting. I haven't eaten for 16 hours. I'm tracking. I'm only doing like I'm eating somewhere between 500 and 800 calories. I really need to get this weight off. And it's like, we can't work out today. Like you're not safe to work out with. You're actually a liability. So I have had clients in the last couple of years that I've let go because they keep going into these things that they've seen online, like, this person's told me, or this person I've seen on Instagram has said that I need to intermittent fast, that I need to do this, and they're clearly not responding to that. And even as you can counsel them, but to actually crack the whole diet culture is so flippin' hard.
It still exists, Amanda. I have a
It's
16-year-old
so
daughter.
hard, and I really love, like, finding people like Jen on Instagram, who's really not afraid to say that's BS. I like that, and it's done in a way where it's educational, and the science is out there, it's backed up, because there is a lot of garbage out there and a lot of people in the fitness space that are still in diet culture world. And actually yesterday I started with a brand new client, and her first session with me, and she says, I'm so glad that I found you, because I've had bad experiences with other personal trainers before. And I'm like, what was your experience? And she said, well, I used to have a personal trainer that, he was all buff and cut, and continually told her that she wasn't going to attain any of her goals unless she cut A, B, C, D out of her diet. And unless she, really committed to what she wants to do and what her goals are, and she said she felt really defeated by that, because what he was asking her to do or wanting her to do didn't work for her. She works shift work. She's very busy. What he was telling her she had to do didn't even fit her lifestyle. So I also think it's really important that people in the fitness space need to understand the nuances of people having different lifestyles and different work schedules, and they have to fit their programming to fit those people's lives too. Like, or it's not going to be sustainable. The sustainability is not being promoted out there either, right? It's black and white, this or that.
Jen, do
Wear the
you
weighted vest. Like,
no,
it's very, people are not understanding. And I have to say, I get a lot of questions about the weighted vest thing. I'm just going to put it out there now. If you want to wear a weighted vest, that is totally up to you. Go ahead. Like, I am never going to tell somebody that that is not working for you. If you feel like you want to walk your dog and have a weighted vest on, go nuts. But there are implications of wearing it, right? You have to make sure that you don't have like neck, shoulder, thoracic injury. But does it actually prevent osteoporosis or whatever the claims are? No. Is it just kind of extra weight you're carrying around? Yeah. But I do that better on my own as well.
there is. But Jen, if you had one diet culture wellness trend that you could just take it and just toss it out the window, what do you think?
Such a Pandora's box there, Serena.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I know.
Well, and first I want to say, Amanda, I love that you have that on your radar. I think it is so important that anybody who is especially working with people who are, training and in fitness have that diet culture halo, on your radar. I think that's so important, and I'm sure that your clients really, really benefit from having somebody who sees that, because diet culture is everywhere. It's not going to go away. It's a multi-billion dollar industry, and there's always going to be somebody who is going to try and profit off of our insecurities. So understanding that it's out there and just keeping an eye out for it, I think is helpful. But I think probably the thing that I wish I could erase from our collective beliefs is the misunderstanding about carbohydrates, because this is the one that I see that is impacting our health and our energy and how we feel. And so much of it is science that has been debunked for, 10 or 15 years, and yet it still lives on. So I don't know how much of a discussion we want to have about it, but, the myths about carbohydrates and insulin, for example, that because carbohydrates increase insulin levels, that is always a bad thing. But that's not true at all. There are other things that increase insulin levels. Protein also increases insulin levels. And yet you don't hear anybody shitting on protein all the time. So the idea that the insulin rise, the idea that carbohydrates cause weight gain, all of that has been debunked many, many, many times. There was even a really creative person, I can't remember who it was, who did a 30-day test experiment where he was having 70, I think, or 80% of his energy intake was coming from simple sugars to illustrate that it was not going to result in weight gain. And I think even in this 30 days, like, he lost weight. So I think a lot of people have an unnecessary fear about carbohydrates. And when we get to midlife and menopause, because that's kind of what we're talking about today, carbohydrates are our brains, well, at any age, they're our brain's preferred source of fuel. So I don't know about any of you, but brain fog, I do not want to be giving my brain low octane fuel. I don't want to be making it reach for its break in case of emergency fuel system, right? I want to give it what it needs, not only for brain fog, but just cognitive health and function. When we think about energy to move our bodies, to work out, to build muscle, all of that is easier, more efficient, and more enjoyable if we're not trying to limit our carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are also a delicious source of fiber for most of us, because fiber is a plant. You only get fiber from plants. Whole grains, fruits, other vegetables, these are all sources of fiber. And if there's one thing that people need to add to their diets because most adults are not getting enough, it's fiber. Why make that harder by trying to live without oatmeal, as an example, or trying to count how many blueberries you have in a day because they're an above ground fruit? Like, there's just so many ridiculous, almost magical myths about carbohydrates that I think if we could just collectively erase that from our working memory, eating would feel a lot easier. Because that's what I hear all the time from people when I just say, like, just eat the carbohydrates. Find ways that you can include them that feel good, that are balanced, if you want to use that word. So you don't have to only have carbohydrates. You can add things to your plate. Make it one of those three legs of a stool so that you're having protein, carbohydrates, and fat, but don't fear them, because that is not serving you in any way.
I had a trainer years ago told me that if it wasn't green, I wasn't allowed to eat it. So fruits were out, carrots, couldn't have a tomato, nothing. If I wanted to do anything, it had to be green, anything, and protein, lean protein. That was it, and that was all. I was exhausted. I couldn't do my workouts. I felt worse about myself. I had 3 little kids at home. Like, I was just completely depleted. Lisa, I bet you have something that you would like to add to all of.
My brain's going in about 4 different directions, but one of the things, that you had said earlier in the conversation, um, is around how we measure and how we connect to how we are actually feeling. So let me clarify a little bit. So I recently moved, had to get a new family physician. Went into that family physician. He's going through my health. I work out every day on a regular basis, all of the things. She's like, "Oh, these things look really good, but your BMI is a little bit high. So why don't you schedule an appointment to come back and talk about that?" And my response always was freeze. So I just froze in the moment, and inside I was screaming, but I just kept my calm face on and came home and had a big rant about it because he saw my husband directly after me and said not one word to my husband about his BMI, who I know would have been significantly higher than mine. Now, as a coach, I know that BMI is not an appropriate measure of a healthy body. And if you don't have that information, and two, have been so disconnected from how your body actually feels, because you are so wrapped up in all of the cultural myths, Jen, that you talked about, carbohydrates is just one of them. There's so many. How do you give women the tools to, one, reconnect and actually know how their body is feeling so that they can start to make those actual connections about what actually feels good in their body versus what is something external that's telling them how they should feel or what they should do?
Oh, I love that question. And I'm angry for you about your healthcare interaction because it is all too common. And my first reaction was he didn't even ask you if it was something that you cared about. It would be one thing if he said, according to my records, your BMI is da da da. Is that something you want to talk about? That would be a very different conversation than make an appointment to talk about it, because then it's really saying, this is something I'm telling you is wrong versus this is something we can have a conversation about. So I'm really upset for you that that happened. I think attunement, which is also known as interoceptive awareness, is a skill that we were never taught. We, from a very young age, were never taught to listen to our bodies. We have spent our lives telling it what to do and comparing ourselves to other bodies instead of getting to know our own. I'm sure lots of you can certainly relate to that in the work that you do. So when women come to me and they say, I really want to learn about intuitive eating, I'm done with diets and I really want to learn to eat in menopause in a way that's going to help me feel strong and have the independence and mobility, but I have no idea what that looks like. The first thing we start with is hunger and fullness, because those are cues that we have many reasons why we eat, but we also have a biological drive to eat. We have physical hunger. We have sensations that most of us can relate to. We can also experience fullness in a way that is a bit more tangible. But I always like to lead with something called satisfaction. And so the satisfaction factor is one of the principles of intuitive eating. And it is one of the fastest ways that I have found for women to connect with what they want, which is really how we start to listen to what our bodies are telling us, is when we allow the what I want to have a voice instead of just the what should I have? What am I allowed to have? What would be good? When we take the morality out of our decisions about food and really start connecting it to not only the physical nutrition experience, but welcoming the pleasure of eating, then that voice gets louder very quickly. When we take it out of the closet, as it were, and say like, yeah, you're allowed to eat something because it tastes good. That really opens the door to women getting to know themselves again and trusting that they actually have the skills and the ability, the tools, the confidence to nurture that.
Yeah, oh my God, everything you just said. I'm actually doing an event tonight, and this is it's just so funny how it overlaps in so many different spaces for women, this concept of not listening to your body, doing performing, basically, performing for instead of feeling inside of your own body. I mean, I grew up with, I don't know if you guys heard about the heart attack diet. It's like a can of tuna and a piece of bread and a boiled egg. Like that was what was on my cupboard. That was what my mother had in there. So that's what I was doing when I was like 15, 16 years old. It's everywhere we go. We think it might be generational. It's not. We think it might be cultural. It's really not. Like it's kind of infiltrating us from all different spaces. Deb, we'd like to hear from you.
Doctors are not easy to get in to see. And if you do have a doctor, as a lot of Ontarians do not, my doctor is a 2-hour drive. So I go to my naturopath. She's not. I'm going to chat GPT to ask about my symptoms. I know I'm not the only one doing this. So my question to you, Jen, are you hearing more people that are using AI or other tools to get the healthcare that they're looking for? What is the solution if there is anything?
That's such an interesting question. Sorry to hear that it's so difficult to access the care that you need. I mean, for years we've had Dr. Google, right? And so now I think we have Dr. ChatGPT. So, for me, it's a little bit like apples and apples, because for many years, and I'm sure lots of you have this as well, people come in and say, well, I Googled my symptoms or I found this website. And now they're just asking ChatGPT. And I don't think that I think that with ChatGPT or with any AI, there's always that seed of doubt. So it's still not like you're getting 100% reliable, accurate information. Whereas I would say if you Google and you find reputable sources that are not written by I actually feel like that's a better option. Like if somebody goes to, a Harvard or Mayo Clinic website to get medical information, you can be reasonably assured that it's not hallucinating its answers. Says if you ask ChatGPT, 80% or 90% or 99% may be accurate. But if 1% is inaccurate and you then are following that and you think, oh my gosh, I have to do this because it was in this list of other things, that's where I feel like it gets messy for people. So, I mean, obviously AI has its use, but I would not personally use it for medical information that I'm
You have
trusting,
to worry about
you know.
confirmation bias too. I just thought I'd throw that out
Gosh,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
tells you what you
confirmation
want to
bias
hear.
tends to happen when you start
Yeah,
going down that rabbit hole of ChatGPT and even Google. You start getting response to whatever you're putting in. Like if
absolutely.
you're on the path of thinking it could be something and you keep talking to it, it's going to send you down the rabbit hole of confirmation bias.
Yeah, all of a sudden that little
Absolutely.
mole on your arm, you're dying, you know? It's like, "Oh my god, I gotta give away all my stuff now, write my will."
Is AI really saving you time if you end up worrying about something that you didn't need to worry about? Is,
Exactly.
kind of another way that I would look at it. So,
Yeah, but it is really tough, I mean, when you don't have that healthcare provider. I feel really blessed. I do have a family doctor, and I'm in Nova Scotia, and the healthcare is some people will say it's not awesome. I think maybe I've had a pretty decent experience. Plus, also, we have some online medical help through my husband's work as well. So if there's anything on the go, I've got like a doctor in my pocket that I can do a consult with. So I feel really blessed for all of that. I can't really imagine not having that access as quickly as maybe I have a one little phone call to my doctor and I can have a prescription done. I know I'm the anomaly. I know that. I don't take it for granted at all. I think it's just absolutely crazy. On that note, though, can we switch it up just a little bit? I just want to talk. So Jen and I had a conversation over Instagram when we were first talking, and this kind of rolls into it. We're talking about AI and we're talking about socials and Google and all of these things, and now we're seeing the dreaded Menowashing of every single thing and product. And it's just, in my opinion, and I think you guys might agree with me, I'm sure there's some fantastic products out there that are gonna, have lots of nutrition in them, sure. But do they have to be washed with menopause? Or can they just be a health food? And what that looks like coming from women, it's just another thing to keep the economy going, because if you tell a woman she needs something, then that's where the money's going to go. So now all of a sudden we went from nobody talks about menopause. Oh my gosh, I wish we talked about menopause for community and health and care, to everyone's talking about menopause and they're monetizing it up the yin yang. So, Jen, I want to talk to you about that a little bit because I know that you and I had a little chat about that.
yeah. Oh, this is another soapbox issue of mine. It all started, and I can't remember if this is how our conversation started, but a few weeks ago, I was giving a presentation in Buffalo. There's this Niagara Medical Campus, and they have an annual Food as Medicine conference, and they invited me to speak on a women's health panel. And I wanted to speak to menowashing because I really feel like it's something that, again, like ages and stages of midlife, we need to be talking about. Because if you don't know what's out there, you might think that all of these products are vetted or are valid. So I asked ChatGPT to give me an example of what would be the most obnoxious example of a food product to illustrate the concept of menowashing. And what it came up with was so accurate, I actually had to go search to see if this was a product.
Yeah, this was why you and I were having this conversation. I saw that and I commented on it and I was like, "Oh my God." I don't mean to interrupt you, Jen, but just for a second, because we just went right into Menowashing. I didn't really, for the listeners out there, the idea is, right, if I haven't said it clearly, is that there are products out there that are so beneficial to our bodies, but the idea that we're bringing together anything that could be like a day-to-day, nutrition or healthcare or anything, and just slapping menopause on it so that it sells. So this is what we're talking about kind of when it comes to Menowashing. Go ahead. I didn't mean
Very
to
similar
interrupt.
to greenwashing, right? So
Right.
calling something organic, calling something green, and assuming that there are additional benefits because it confers that quality. So there's a lot of companies that are jumping on the menopause bandwagon. But if wellness culture really cared about wellness, it wouldn't come with a shopping cart because you can't buy wellness. And so when somebody says, here's my new Meno product, and I get 15 to 20 pitches a week in my email and inboxes from companies that want me to partner with them, people will notice I have not partnered with one company in all of my years on social media because there is no evidence for most of them for the claims that they are making. It is really different when somebody says, hey, I've put together this tea and it tastes great. And here are some herbs that might do these things. But to say, here's a Meno tea that calms your Meno flashes and makes you Meno calm, like it's just advertising.
Soon we're going to have like Meno apples.
Absolutely.
My
Absolutely.
response to those in my inbox is, "Sorry, this doesn't align with me," or
I don't
"This
even
doesn't,"
respond
like,
anymore. I
it's
just delete.
no. There are
Yeah.
some I
So,
don't really respond. Did you get the one that, they wanted to sell you a cow placenta in a capsule?
oh, I know. I think
Yeah,
either my
that one was
filter picked that
interesting.
up and went it right to spam, or they decided to pass on me. Yeah. Yeah. But so I think this idea of menowashing, though, is again, it's preying on our vulnerabilities. They know that there's, many, many tens of thousands of millions, maybe billions of women who are in this age group, this demographic, 40 to 65, who have more disposable income than other age brackets, who are educated, looking for solutions, are informed consumers, are, searching, whether it's Google or AI for answers, and they're jumping on that. And so we need to kind of turn the tables and really make sure that we're the educated consumers, that we have this filter that says, wait a minute, if this is true, did this company really discover the secret of the universe and they're selling it to me for $49 a month on a subscription? Or are they just taking advantage of a trend? And, I think, Deb, you've got a great example of a product that is meeting a need that is not menowashing. You have a product that is designed to help women in a stage of life where where we all know that women have this problem. This is something that we're all susceptible and vulnerable to, and your product is evidence-based and meets this need. It's not saying you have to use this in menopause, other or else. No, or you're not saying that it is the solution to the universe. And I think that's where a lot of the menowashing comes in, is like, this fixes everything. It paints this really rosy, beautiful picture of like, life is going to be great. You just have to take this supplement every morning. So, um, yeah, I think with
I
meno,
love that Deb actually tells people, I mean, I could let you speak for yourself, Deb, but she'll actually, and said in the beginning of the podcast even, we're not here to take the pain away. We're not here to alleviate the things that your body is going to have to do completely. It's not medicinal, but we are here to help you maybe have a good Tuesday, maybe have a little juicy veg when you want to play with your partner or yourself. Like, maybe not worry about walking in the superstore and just like having to, move around because you're having so much pain down there. Let's just get as much comfort as we possibly can.
That's why I'm adamant about not going down the washing. If that means I don't get the sales, then I don't get the sales. I am not falsely saying something about our product that is not true. Better yet, go to the Yuka, YUKA app, scan the product. It will give you a very good indication of how reputable that product is. We're 100 out of 100 on that app. You have to do your research.
Can I bounce in here and also say, like, talk about the mental washing that even happens in the fitness space? Because there's a lot of fitness influencers out there now that are bouncing on the menopause train. maybe they might have, might have taken something for menopause, like maybe a course or something, or whatever the case may be, but they're making these huge claims that you're going to lose 20 pounds in the next 2 months or 30 pounds in 60 days, and those are other Menowashing things that are happening even in that space. And they're selling supplements, they're selling peptides, they're selling all these things for women to put into their bodies and promising them that they're going to lose all this weight. And it's literally thousands of dollars for this kind of thing, to promise a woman a body that may not happen for her. Like, I mean, there's some women that naturally and their genes will allow them to get that six pack. But at the end of the day, the majority of us in menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, for us to get that lean is really, really tough, and really strict ways of eating, what you're eating. I mean, you can't tell me that you're just intuitively eating and you're that ripped. Like, what are you taking? What is your actual nutrition plan look like? Are you miserable? So like, people need to understand that when they see these fitness influencers also making these claims, it's just as bad as the supplement companies that are slapping menopause onto their labels and selling it, to make money. It's the same thing in the fitness space.
And this conversation is so indicative of the thing that I am the most worried about in the whole menopause sphere, the whole menopause conversation. And that is nuance. We are so desperate for just give me the one thing that I can do that will fix everything. That's all I want. And it's not possible, right? Because it is such an individual experience, because we are complex, mystical, wonderful, incredible beings that require individual care and a great deal of nuance. And so the thing that I worry about is, everything that we've been talking about is purchase this product or do this or do that, or that HRT. This is the thing that I really am worried about in terms of messaging and marketing, is that menopause hormone therapy will solve all your problems. And it is not an either or conversation, right? It is both and. And so, Jenn, what I was wondering from you is, how are you helping women navigate that nuance and realize that it is not just this one thing that we need to, if you are on hormone therapy, you still have to support your body with movement, with stress management, with food, with sleep. It's not either or.
Yes, I actually did a whole podcast episode last week with another dietitian from the UK about the one thing, because we're seeing this so much, this like, do this one thing and it will solve all your problems. And I appreciate the mention of the word nuance, because what works for me for one symptom may not work for all of you, may not work for someone else, but also hearing my experience may be helpful to someone else who's exploring options. So I think that we need to remember that sharing our stories can be powerful, but we don't want to turn somebody else's story into our treatment plan to say, this worked for this person, so I have to do it this way. And anybody who's been pregnant, I think this might help. But I remember when I was pregnant, my first pregnancy, I had 0 symptoms. My second pregnancy was a twin pregnancy, which I realize now was probably like my perimenopause babies. But, I was so sick and so nauseous. And all you have to do is tell somebody that you're having morning sickness, and you will invite 10,000 opinions about what worked for you and what worked for your mother's, brothers, uncles, cousins, nephews, neighbor. And you will, when you're feeling awful, you will try anything. And so I think that when we're sharing our stories about what worked and what didn't, we have to remember and think about who is receiving them. The people who are receiving them are in a vulnerable position. We don't want to make them feel less than or broken if they don't want to use something or can't use something. But if they want to hear our story, then stories can be powerful. So the nuance, I think, really falls on both the giver and the receiver, whether that's a healthcare practitioner, whether that's a coach, whether that's your best friend, to say, you know what worked for this is what worked for me. It may not work for you, and that's okay. And recognizing that there is no one way to menopause. There really
Absolutely.
isn't. I love HRT for other people, but I'm hormone sensitive, and progesterone made me feel like the biggest bag of flaming hot garbage that I've ever felt in my life. I couldn't get out of bed. I was that depressed and tired and exhausted and cried at like the thought of crying. So after 6 or 7 months of trying every different combination and preparation and for other reasons I couldn't use the IED, I just had to say like, this is not going to work for me. And I need to accept that. My sister, who's a half sister, she counts down the minutes until she can start her 2 weeks of progesterone. It makes her feel so good. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like if it stops working. So we're all different. And that is okay. So I think I really just try and reiterate that message that don't feel like you are failing if something worked for someone else but didn't work for you.
Jenn, before you go, why don't you tell our listeners your top 3 midlife must knows? If you had to give somebody 3 things that, this is what we need to do and this is how you need to do it and be really strict. No, I'm just kidding. Because of course we did just talk about the nuance of everything and not
Yeah.
everything is going to work for everybody. But what would be your biggest advice?
One of the most life-changing things for me was when I started reading the data on happiness and that women post-menopausally are happier than even their premenopausal selves. When I realized that that I was hopefully going to spend 40 or 50% of my life in postmenopause, because I went into menopause at 44. My grandmother was 93 when she died. She also went into menopause at 44. It really shifted how I thought about how do I want to eat, to move, to live, and what do I no longer want to care about? What does not deserve to come with me into this second part of my life? And I think when I share that with women, they're surprised because the voices of the experiences that are not fun, and I'm not saying that it's a fun ride to get there, and I'm not saying that it's always, sunshine and rainbows, but we tend to hear about only the awful things. And so find the people who are shouting from the rooftops that this is going somewhere good. Find those people. They're out there. I'm one of them. And as soon as you start to look for them, you will find them. So that's number one. The second one is that when it comes to nutrition, we're playing the long game of health. We're not playing the short game. Don't spend 1 minute of this precious life worrying about what you eat on vacation or at Christmas dinner or whether or not you had enough protein for breakfast on a Tuesday. That is not worth the investment of your time or your energy because that's not going to impact whether you live to be 85. What we do consistently in the patterns of eating, which is kind of how I like to talk about it, can make a difference. But even if you're putting 100% into your nutrition, the return on that investment is going to be 30 or 40% at best because of the determinants of health. So what I see a lot of people doing is putting 100% of their time, effort, energy, money, thought, worry into trying to make everything perfect. You're never going to see the return on that investment. So diversify your investments when it comes to health. Don't put everything in like 1 or 2 buckets. And the third thing is just learn to trust yourself. If you have gotten to midlife and you feel like you don't recognize who you see in the mirror, you don't recognize how you feel, your relationships are changing, your interests are changing, it feels like everything is being turned inside out, learn to trust the process. It's not always going to be comfortable. It's not always going to be fun. But if you know, going back to point number 1, that it's going somewhere good, it is so much easier to trust the process. So learn to trust yourself would be the third one.
Love that point on happiness. We just don't put enough emphasis on what brings us happiness and the joy that's going to come with this transition into a new stage of your life, that it's not supposed to be the same. I've read in so many quotes that say, if you are the same person in 20 years that you were 20 years ago, you've wasted 20 years of your life. Move forward, move through the mud, go through the transitions and accept them for what they are.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Jen. We're so grateful to have you on from the Netherlands, and I can't wait to get you back over here in Nova Scotia. I want
It
to
was
thank
amazing.
you for coming. I want to thank Lisa and Amanda and Deb for being here, of course, and for the listeners for listening to Unmuted Midlife Roundtable. We will be back next month with all of the conversations that they told you were never supposed to have.